Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
For the Department of Housing and Urban Development, management challenges tend to persist. In its annual review, HUD's Inspector General finds some progress, but also that 8 of the top 10 challenges remain from last year. We get an update now from IG Ray Oliver Davis. Ms. Davis, good to have you back.
Thanks, Tom. Always good to be here.
And let's start with the good news. You found that on these top 10 challenges for this annual report, HUD has made some progress. Tell us where they did well.
Sure, absolutely. We try every year to reflect progress HUD is making. And I would say this year we've seen tremendous progress in human capital management. And of course, that's not a challenge solely for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. That's a challenge that we see SIGI reflect government-wide. But what we've seen specifically at HUD is a reduction in time to hire by about 23% since FY 2020, which means they're onboarding more people, which, one of the main challenges that we focus on is capacity. So more people doing the work is a good thing. They have a head count of about 8,360. They had 8,347 in FY30. So this is the largest headcount in 10 years.
Right, and 23% in federal hiring terms is a couple of weeks or maybe a month off of the hiring process, maybe longer.
Right. And, we've seen this through them modernizing their policies. They've developed workforce planning. They're doing more to track those activities. And the Office of Capital Management is doing a much better job, I think, of interfacing with the program offices, hearing their needs and getting people on board just frankly faster.
Yeah, so that then in turn kind of helps the rest of the staff when the staffing that's needed and authorized is actually there.
Absolutely. And, human capital management, IT, things of that nature, we call those enterprise challenges. I mean, because they certainly affect the operations and then they ultimately greatly impact the mission. So it's good to see this reduction in time to hire for sure.
And if you look at the list of best places to work in the federal government, HUD is kind of middling. They're not terrible, but they did rise a little bit from year to year, too.
Well, we haven't looked specifically at their FVS scores, but we're certainly aware of them. And yeah, we find in general, the workforce is very dedicated to the mission at HUD.
Okay. And then some things did not come out quite so well improved, and promoting health and safety in HUD-assisted housing tops your list.
It does. This tends to be an area of struggle for the department, I think, in part because it's such a decentralized part of their mission, as is most of it. If we're talking about grants and talk about money that's going through the department, we're really looking at program partners. There's over 3,000 public housing authorities. We have over 500,000 landlords participating in the voucher program. All of them have to be held to a health and safety standard. People living in HUD housing deserve to live in safe, sanitary housing. We find that to be a great challenge for HUD and its oversight, whether we're talking about lead, whether we're talking about the inspections of these properties and holding those landlords accountable for remediating problems. It's definitely an ongoing issue, and overall it attributes to HUD's challenge in increasing affordable housing. They have to maintain what they have.
Right. In some ways, they have the challenge of, just pick one out, McDonald's making sure that its franchisees operate according to standards that the corporation wants.
Yes, absolutely. Recently we looked at the Housing Choice Voucher Program, which is where, an individual, a beneficiary can take their voucher and go out to a landlord and have some choice in where they live. But we found that the inspections, the problems that were being pointed out to the PHAs who were overseeing the landlords in the voucher program, these things weren't being held accountable. There wasn't remediation. And in fact, when they knew things weren't being done appropriately, they were still continuing to pay the landlords. So, the contracts weren't being abated, the payments weren't stopping. So we have people living in substandard housing, even out in the voucher program, yes.
So in other words, even though HUD doesn't go sweep the halls and fix the refrigerators and so forth in housing, they do have leverage if they could somehow strengthen it.
They do. And look, it's certainly incumbent upon me to say the biggest challenge is if you have to relocate people, where do you put them? And, we encounter that a lot. We have not just substandard housing, but we have, just plain old bad actors. We have been doing, as you know, Tom, sexual harassment, sexual misconduct. We've been looking at that in the program, landlords that just plain victimize the beneficiaries and the tenants. And again, I know HUD joins us in this. We want to get bad actors out. We want to hold people accountable, but there is a lack of affordable housing. There is a huge challenge when those contracts are abated and people have to be relocated.
And what's your recommendation there in that area?
Well, frankly, we're studying that right now. We're looking at property Pepper Tree and outside Memphis, Tennessee. It was a project-based rental assistance program where ultimately HUD abated the contract and people had to be moved. And we know they're working closely there with the community, but we're studying the after effects of that to sort of better understand perhaps best practices, perhaps the challenges the community faces in those moments, as well as the department. So I hope to have more on that, but it's always going to be a challenge, I believe.
Right. If they shut down a place, say, or withdraw support, fine, you've gotten rid of that landlord, but then you have the people to deal with, and they have to have housing. That's the central challenge here.
They have to have housing. Think about it. If one of us were forced to move, our families here, our friends are here, our jobs are here, our community is here, our churches are here, our schools are here. There's everything about that that's impacted. Another thing with relocation and abatement of contracts is if we're talking about project-based rental assistance, and we have to abate that contract, or HUD has to abate that contract, there are laws on the books that won't enable them to go out and get more contracts. So if we see a building and the contract shuts down, we will not see a new building. That is simply the case. So they are limited in how many of those contracts they can maintain at any given time.
We're speaking with Ray Oliver Davis, Inspector General of Housing and Urban Development, and that's external to HUD, even though it's mission related. But there are also a lot of internal issues that relate to that are on their top 10 list. Two of them relate: grants management and increasing effectiveness in procurement. So the two channels of outgoing money, grants and procurement, they need to tighten up.
Sure. The procurement challenge is one that we've really heard from the department officials themselves. And Tom, we've changed the way we do these. We don't just look at solely our work. We look at our colleagues at GAO. We talk to the department. We certainly read the news. We listen to your podcast. We talk to external stakeholders, including the Hill and all of the associations that deal with HUD. And one of the things that kept coming up was procurement, a lack of visibility around the process, maybe a lack of coordination between OCPO and the program offices, which would result sometimes in a lapse in contracts that do hold up the mission, do affect the operation. We've seen progress there. We've really focused on highlighting this one. We see dashboards now where OCPO and the program offices can see where contracts are beginning and ending. They can see the status of a procurement. I think the next phase for us is looking at contract performance, and that's something you'll see from us in the future. But absolutely, procurement has made the radar for us the last few years based predominantly on HUD principles. And look, if we're talking about grants management, that is the name of the game for HUD is grants. Everything is coming out in a grant. One thing we're hoping for there is more transparency in the data, because we want to go beyond just compliance. And we want to look at performance. We want to see, how are these grants really impacting the communities? Are they doing what they're supposed to do? So we're looking to HUD to really collect better data